There's something about camping in the rain that feels safe. The sound of it on the tent roof becomes a blanket, steady and soothing, drowning out everything else. But what if, buried in that sound, you caught something unnatural? A rhythm too deliberate, too heavy, like footsteps squelching in the mud, circling your camp, stopping just outside your tent flap. That's what happened to us one night in the woods, and it's why I'll never sleep peacefully in the rain again. There were 4 of us that weekend, me, my brother Kyle, and 2 friends, Travis and Evan. We'd planned a short backpacking trip, nothing ambitious, just a couple of nights in the woods to unwind. It had been raining off and on for days, and the forecast called for more storms, but none of us minded. We were used to rough weather, and honestly, the sound of rain on the tent was half the appeal. We hiked a few miles in and found a spot beside a creek, flat enough for tents and close enough to water without being flood prone. The trees around us leaned heavy with wet leaves, dripping steadily. The air smelled of pine and damp earth, and a mist clung low to the ground. By evening, camp was set. 2 tents pitched, a small fire struggling against the drizzle, gear tucked under tarps. We cooked a simple dinner, ramen, jerky, a couple of beers passed around, and settled by the fire. The rain picked up, tapping against our hoods and sizzling in the flames. There was a quietness in the forest that night I couldn't shake. No insects buzzing, no owls calling, just the rain and the occasional pop of wet wood. The kind of quiet where every laugh sounded too loud and every pause made you glance at the trees. Still, by the time we crawled into our tents, everything felt normal enough. The rain hammered steady on the fabric, drowning out the world. I drifted into sleep thinking how peaceful it was, never imagining how quickly that feeling would shatter. Sometime after midnight, I woke up. At first, I thought it was just the rain. It was pounding hard, drumming steady against the tent roof. But underneath it, I caught another sound. Squish, squish, squish. Footsteps, slow, heavy, sinking into the mud. I held my breath, straining to listen. The rhythm was deliberate, 2-legged, pacing steadily. It circled once, far enough out that I thought it might be Travis up to take a leak, but then the sound looped again, closer this time, passing right behind my tent. "Evan?" I whispered, but there was no answer, just steady breathing from the others, asleep. The steps moved again, crunching through wet leaves, squelching in mud, around and around, like someone was walking slow laps around our camp. Every time they faded and came back, completing the circle. Finally, Kyle stirred beside me. "You hear that?" he whispered. "Yeah," I breathed. "Footsteps." We lay frozen, staring at the thin fabric of the tent walls as the sound came closer. The rain blurred everything, but there was nothing there, just trees swaying, drops sliding off branches, mud glistening black. The footsteps stopped the instant the light hit. We waited. Minutes dragged. The rain filled the silence. Finally, Kyle zipped the tent closed again. "Probably just water dripping weird," he whispered, though he didn't sound convinced. I lay awake long after, listening, and eventually the sound faded, leaving only the steady patter of rain. But I knew what I'd heard, and I knew it would be back. By morning, the storm had thinned to a misty drizzle. The fire pit was drowned, the creek running high and fast, swollen with runoff. We crawled out of the tents, stretching sore backs, rubbing sleep from our eyes. Nobody said much at first until Travis asked, "Who was walking around last night?" We froze. "You heard it too?" Kyle asked quickly. Travis nodded, circling us. "I thought it was you guys messing around." Evan shook his head. "I didn't hear a thing, slept straight through." But the way he said it, like he wished he had, made my skin crawl. We checked the ground around camp. The rain had turned the dirt to thick mud, perfect for holding tracks. But there was nothing. Just our own footprints from the day before, softened by water. No sign of anyone circling in the night. "How's that possible?" Travis muttered, crouching low to scan the mud. "We all heard it. That was footsteps." I didn't have an answer. The storm had been heavy, sure, but not enough to erase fresh prints in just a few hours, and the ground around us was untouched. It was like whoever, or whatever, had walked there hadn't left a trace at all. We made breakfast in silence. Steam rose from our mugs of instant coffee, rain dripping from the tarp above. None of us wanted to say what we were all thinking, that maybe we'd imagined it, that maybe exhaustion and storm sounds had played tricks on us. But when I caught Kyle's eyes across the fire, I knew he didn't believe that, and neither did I. The rain came back heavier the next night, hammering so hard against the tents it drowned out our voices when we tried to talk. We turned in early, more from unease than tiredness. For a while, the storm was all I heard. Then, underneath it, the rhythm started again. Squish, squish, squish. The footsteps were back. This time there was no mistaking them. Slow, deliberate, circling us just like before. Kyle whispered from the dark, "You hear it?" I did, my throat dry. Travis muttered a curse from the other tent. "It's right outside." The steps grew slower, heavier. They stopped for long seconds, then started again, closer. I could hear water sloshing in the prints as they sank deep into the mud. And then, silence. I stared at the thin fabric of the tent. A shadow moved across it. Someone, something, was leaning close, just inches away, the faint outline distorted by the lantern glow inside. My skin prickled, as if a hand was hovering right above me. "Get the light," whispered Kyle. I grabbed the flashlight, fumbling. My hand shook as I flicked it on, aiming at the flap. Before I could unzip it, the footsteps resumed, circling faster now, around and around and around. Travis lost it. His revolver cracked once into the night, the gunshot swallowed by the storm. For a split second, the steps stopped. The rain seemed to hush, like the whole forest was holding its breath. Then, nothing. No footsteps, no shadow, just the endless drumming of rain. We sat awake the rest of the night, staring at the thin walls of fabric that felt like the only thing between us and something we couldn't explain. Morning brought no comfort. The storm had washed the forest clean, the mud slick and shining. Once again, there were no tracks. Nothing to explain the footsteps that had circled us for hours. We didn't bother with breakfast. We packed in silence, hands moving fast, each of us glancing at the trees as if the sound might start again even in daylight. By noon, we were back on the trail, heading toward the car. Every mile felt longer than the last, the rain still dripping steadily from the canopy. None of us spoke about it. Not the footsteps, not the shadow, not the way the storm had gone quiet after the gunshot. We just kept walking, rifles slung tight, eyes fixed on the ground. When we finally reached the trailhead, I swore I heard it one last time, just faint beneath the hiss of rain on leaves. Squish, squish, squish. I stopped dead, scanning the woods. Nothing moved. No lights, no shapes, no people. Only trees standing still in the drizzle. We drove home and never went back to that site. But even now, years later, every time it rains at night, I lie awake, listening. The rhythm is always there, tucked under the storm. Wet, deliberate footsteps, circling closer, waiting for me to open the tent.
Thunderstorms in the mountains can play tricks on your ears. The rain hammers so hard on the trees and rocks that you start hearing shapes in the noise, voices even. At least that's what I told myself the first time I heard it. Help me, please, help me. Over and over, the exact same words. At first, I thought it was another hiker caught in the storm, but by the third night, when the voice circled our camp without ever coming closer, I realized it wasn't a person calling from the woods. It was something else. It was just me and my buddy Aaron on that trip. We'd planned to hike a loop through the Blue Ridge Mountains, 5 days of rain or shine. By the third afternoon, the shine part had disappeared. Heavy gray clouds rolled over the ridges, and thunder started rumbling so deep it shook the ground under our boots. We barely had time to throw up a tarp before the downpour hit. Rain sheeted down in silver walls, the sound so loud we had to shout to hear each other. Water pooled fast around our boots, soaking into the dirt until everything turned to thick mud. We huddled under the tarp, our packs piled between us, the storm pressing in on all sides. The forest blurred into a wall of dripping trunks and whipping branches. The air smelled of wet earth and ozone, sharp and electric. For hours, the storm didn't let up, just constant hammering rain broken by thunderclaps that rattled through the valley. It should have been comforting, the kind of noise that lulls you into a daze. But the longer it went on, the more it felt like the storm was alive, leaning close, smothering every other sound. When the first voice cut through the rain, it felt sharper than the thunder. It came just after midnight. The storm hadn't eased, rain still slamming down so hard the tarp sagged under the weight. I was half asleep, listening to the endless drumming, when a voice pierced through it. Help me, please help me. I sat up fast, heart in my throat. At first I thought I'd imagined it, but Aaron was already awake, staring into the rain. You heard that? I whispered. He nodded slowly. Somebody's out there. We both grabbed our flashlights, scanning the dripping wall of trees. The beams caught nothing but rain, sheets of it shimmering in the light. Then it came again. Same words, same tone. Help me. Please help me. It was close, too close, but the strangest thing was how flat it sounded. No variation, no change in panic, just the same exact plea, like a recording looped over and over. "Hey!" Aaron shouted. "Where are you?" The rain swallowed his voice. We waited breathless, but there was no response. Just the exact same cry a moment later. "Help me! Please help me!" It was identical. Every syllable the same pitch, the same length. I felt my stomach twist. A real person's voice changes even when they repeat themselves. But this, it was like hearing a phrase on repeat, stripped of anything human. Aaron stood like he was ready to run into the storm, but I grabbed his arm. "No, something's not right." He hesitated, torn between instinct and fear. The voice called out again, steady, unchanging. We sat frozen under the tarp, rain pounding all around, listening to the same words over and over until my skin prickled with cold. By the time the storm eased toward dawn, the voice was gone. But I knew we hadn't imagined it, and I knew we'd hear it again. The second night, it came earlier. We'd moved camp a couple of miles down the trail, hoping the change of location would settle our nerves. By dusk, the storm rolled back in, heavier than before. We set another tarp, built no fire, and tried to convince ourselves the voice had just been the storm playing tricks. But around 9, right as the rain reached its peak, the words cut through again. "Help me! Please help me!" Aaron was on his feet immediately, flashlight in one hand, revolver in the other. His jaw was tight. "I'm gonna check." I grabbed my rain jacket and followed. The forest was a maze of dripping branches, every leaf shedding water, the ground a soup of mud that sucked at our boots. The voice carried just ahead of us, always the same, always urgent. "Help me! Please help me!" We called out again and again. "Where are you? Are you hurt? Keep talking so we can find you." But the voice never changed. No answer to our shouts, no variation in tone, just the same plea, repeated like clockwork. We pushed deeper, our flashlights slicing across trees and wet undergrowth. But there were no footprints in the mud ahead of us, no broken branches, no trail to follow, just untouched forest. And still the voice called, always a little further, always just out of reach. At one point, Aaron stopped and turned to me. Rain streamed off his hood, his eyes wide in the beam of my light. "It's like it wants us to follow," he said, his voice barely a whisper. The next cry came from behind us. We spun, lights flashing back toward camp, but nothing moved between the trees. The storm roared, thunder cracking overhead, but underneath it, the words carried clear as ever. "Help me! Please help me!" Identical, hollow, wrong. That was the moment I knew we weren't looking for someone lost in the storm. Something else was calling us. We stumbled back to camp, soaked to the bone, mud clinging to our boots, nerves stretched thin. The voice hadn't followed us back on the way back, but we both knew it hadn't gone far. We huddled under the tarp, rain pouring so hard it blurred the forest into a wall of gray. Lightning flickered, thunder rolled. For a while, it was only the storm. Then it began again. "Help me! Please help me!" Closer this time, not drifting from a distance, but coming from just beyond the edge of the light. Aaron raised his revolver, scanning the trees with his flashlight. "Where are you?" he shouted, voice hoarse. The reply was instant. "Help me! Please help me!" Same words, same pitch, the same second of silence between them. A perfect loop. The voice started moving, circling our camp, first to the left, then behind, then off to the right, never overlapping, never changing. Each time it paused, the storm seemed to hush, like it was waiting. I gripped my pistol, my hands trembling. "This isn't a person," I whispered, but my words were swallowed by another cry. Aaron snapped. He aimed into the darkness and fired. The blast cracked through the storm, echoing across the ridge. For a heartbeat, everything stopped. Rain, thunder, even the wind seemed to pause. Then, clear as ever, the voice returned. "Help me! Please help me!" Unbroken, unaffected, as if the gunshot hadn't happened at all. We sat frozen, the rain hammering around us, the voice circling closer, never once changing tone. My skin prickled as I realized it wasn't calling for help. It was only pretending. We didn't sleep the rest of that night. The voice circled our camp until dawn, weaving in and out of the rain, repeating its hollow script without falter. Sometimes it sounded just feet away, like someone was crouched at the edge of the tarp. Other times it drifted into the storm, faint but steady, never once breaking pattern. When the sun finally pushed through the clouds, the storm thinned to a drizzle. The voice was gone. The woods looked normal again, branches dripping, ground torn with fresh runoff, mist curling between the trees. We searched around the camp, half expecting to find footprints or some sign of another hiker. There was nothing. The mud was untouched except for our own tracks. No gear, no person, no trail leading away. By noon, we were hiking back toward the trailhead. Neither one of us said it, but we both knew the trip was over. We never even reported it to the rangers. What would we have told them? That the storm had spoken to us? That something in the woods had borrowed a human voice to bait us closer? Weeks later, I scoured the news for missing persons in the area. There were none. But sometimes, late at night, when the rain beats against my windows, I hear it again. Not faint, not imagined, clear as it was on the ridge. "Help me! Please help me!" And I know if I stepped outside into the storm, it would still be waiting for me.
On a rainy night in the backcountry, the fire becomes your lifeline. Its warmth, its glow, the only thing holding back the cold and dark pressing in from the storm. That's why, when a man wandered out of the rain into our campsite, we welcomed him at first. He was soaked through, smiling faintly, speaking little, just another hiker, we thought, until morning came, and all we found were his footprints leading straight into the river, vanishing into the water without a trace. There were 5 of us that weekend, camping on the edge of a swollen river in the Cascades. The rain hadn't stopped for 2 days, turning the ground to mud and bending the trees under its weight. We'd managed to keep a fire going with damp wood and stubborn effort, crouching close to it under a tarp strung between pines. The storm was relentless. Water pattered against our jackets, hissed on the fire, and dripped steadily from every branch above. The air smelled of smoke and wet pine, heavy and raw. It wasn't comfortable, but there was something about the misery that bonded us together, laughing about soggy socks, passing around flasks, joking that we should have brought canoes instead of packs. By 9 o'clock, the fire was burning low, and the storm showed no signs of easing. We huddled close, talking in half-shouts over the downpour. The river churned only 20 yards away, black and swollen, a constant roar under the rain. That was when Evan froze mid-sentence, his eyes fixed on the tree line. "Guys, someone's coming!" Through the sheets of rain, a figure moved, a man walking straight toward our camp, head down, shoulders hunched. He stepped into the circle of firelight, and for a moment, all we could do was stare. He was drenched to the skin, water dripping from his hair and jacket. His pack looked old, worn canvas instead of the nylon we all carried. He didn't speak right away, just gave us a faint smile and gestured toward the fire.
None of us said anything at first. It's not unusual to bump into other hikers in the mountains, but something about the way he stepped into our circle made the hair on my arms prickle. He wasn't out of breath from the hike. He didn't look relieved to find other people. He just smiled faintly, like he already knew we'd be here. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. His voice was calm, steady, oddly flat. Sure," Evan said, scooting over to make room. The man lowered himself by the fire, water dripping steadily from his sleeves. He carried no flashlight, no trekking poles, nothing but that battered old canvas pack strapped tight to his shoulders. His clothes looked decades out of style. Heavy wool pants, a faded jacket with leather patches on the elbows. We offered him coffee, but he shook his head. Food, too. Jerky, crackers, anything. But he didn't touch it. He didn't even hold out his hands toward the fire. He just sat, staring into the flames, rainwater hissing as it dripped from his hair onto the stones. "Where you hiking from?" Aaron asked, finally. The stranger glanced up, smiled faintly again, and said, "North." "That's pretty vague," Evan joked, trying to lighten the mood. "Like north as in Alaska, or just the next trailhead up?" The man didn't answer. His eyes went back to the fire, the smile never fading. We traded looks across the circle. Something was off, though none of us wanted to be the one to call it. It was easier to sit in silence, listening to the rain, pretending the stranger's presence wasn't tightening the air around us. For a while we tried to ignore it. 5 friends huddled under a tarp with a stranger, the storm beating down so loud it filled every pause. We passed a flask, forced out a few jokes, tried to pretend this was normal. But every attempt at conversation with him fell flat. "Where are you headed tomorrow?" Evan asked. The man tilted his head, as if he had to think about the question. Finally he said, "Depends on the weather." His voice was calm, steady, oddly flat, but it carried oddly under the storm, as if the rain bent around it. We asked him his name. He smiled again and said, "Doesn't matter." After that, he hardly spoke at all. He just sat there, dripping wet, his eyes reflecting the firelight in a way that made me look away whenever I caught him. He didn't eat, didn't sip water, didn't even shiver, though the rest of us were shaking in our soaked clothes. At one point, I realized he hadn't taken his pack off. The straps were still snug over his shoulders, as though whatever was inside needed to stay close. By midnight, the fire was nearly gone, wood too wet to keep it alive. The stranger didn't move to leave, but he didn't seem tired either. He sat perfectly still, the faint smile never slipping. When we finally crawled into our tents, I couldn't sleep. Every time I opened my eyes, I saw his shape through the thin fabric, sitting cross-legged by the dying fire, unmoving, watching the last flames die into smoke. The rain pounded harder, branches swayed and snapped, and somewhere in the night, I heard the creak of footsteps in the mud, but no one else stirred. Sometime in the dead of night, I woke to silence. Not total. Rain still drummed on the tarp. The river still roared. But something was missing. The steady sense of another presence by the fire. I unzipped the tent just a few inches and peeked out. The fire was gone. Only faint smoke curling into the rain. And the stranger's silhouette, where he had sat for hours, wasn't there anymore. "Hey!" I whispered, nudging Kyle awake. "He's gone!" We slipped out with our flashlights, beams cutting through the downpour. The camp was still, just our tents, the fire pit, and the sheets of water falling all around. No crunch of boots, no shifting branches. If he'd left, he hadn't made a sound. We searched anyway, circling the clearing, calling out. The rain swallowed our voices whole. Nothing answered. By 2 a.m., soaked to the bone, we gave up and crawled back into the tents. Sleep didn't come easy. Every drip on the tarp, every rush of wind made me think he was still out there, watching from the trees. Morning came gray and heavy, the storm easing to a steady drizzle. That's when Evan found the footprints. They started right at the edge of the fire pit, where he had sat. Deep impressions in the mud, water pooled in each step. They led away from camp in a straight line, toward the river. We followed them in silence, step after step, until they reached the bank, and then they stopped. The last print was half sunk into the mud at the water's edge. Beyond that, nothing. No sign of crossing, no trail along the far bank, just the swollen black current rolling fast and cold. It was like he had walked straight into the river and vanished. We stood there a long time, staring at that last footprint. The river was high, swollen from days of rain, moving fast enough to sweep away a fallen tree. If he'd stepped in, there was no way he could have survived. But there were no drag marks, no splash of mud, no sign of struggle. Just one final step pressed into the bank, ending like a sentence cut short. Evan swore under his breath and backed away. That doesn't make sense. None of it makes sense. We searched a while longer, walking up and down the bank, scanning the opposite shore. Nothing. just the hiss of rain and the rush of water. Eventually, we packed in silence and left camp behind, none of us willing to spend another night there. I've thought about that night 100 times since. The stranger's faint smile, his pack that never left his shoulders, the way he stared at the fire like he'd seen it all before. Sometimes I wonder if he was ever really there at all. But the footprints, I can still see 'em in my head. And when it rains hard enough, drumming on the roof like it did on those tents, I remember the look in his eyes, the look of someone who wasn't passing through the storm, but belonged to it.
When you're deep in the woods during a storm, any sign of light should feel like relief. It means people, help, safety, company. But out there, not every light belongs to something human. That night, as the rain hammered our camp, we saw a lantern glowing between the trees. At first it looked like a lost hiker trying to find the trail. But every time we followed it, the glow slipped farther away, leading us deeper and deeper into the storm. There were only 2 of us on that trip, me and my friend Jordan. We'd chosen a loop trail through the state forest, not too far from home, but far enough that we wouldn't see another soul for days. The rain had started mid-afternoon and hadn't let up since, soaking our packs and turning the trail into a stream. By the time we made camp, we were drenched and exhausted. We pitched the tents on the highest patch of ground we could find and rigged a tarp over the fire pit. Even so, the flames sputtered, smoke mixing with steam as raindrops hissed against the wood. The forest felt different in the storm, not alive, not buzzing with crickets or bird calls, just heavy and smothered. Every sound muted except the rain. The trees pressed close, their black trunks slick with water, branches leaning under the weight of it. We ate quickly, speaking in low voices, the fire struggling to hold against the downpour. I remember staring into the dark between the trees, the way the storm seemed to blur everything together. It was easy to imagine shadows moving out there, shapes shifting in the curtain of rain. Jordan cracked a joke about ghost stories, trying to shake the mood. I laughed, but it felt thin, because even then, before the first light appeared, something in that forest felt wrong, like the rain wasn't the only thing watching us. It showed up just past midnight. The fire had sunk to coals, the rain still coming down in steady sheets, when Jordan froze mid-sentence. "Do you see that?" he whispered. At first I thought it was just a reflection, moonlight on wet bark maybe. But then I saw it too, a pale golden glow flickering faintly between the trees. About 50 yards out, too far to see clearly, but steady enough that it looked like someone carrying a lantern through the forest. We both sat up straighter, listening. The rain muffled everything, but the light moved slowly, weaving through the pines. "Another camper?" I offered, though even as I said it, I knew it didn't make sense. There weren't supposed to be others this deep on the trail, and no one in their right mind would be wandering off trail in the middle of a storm. Jordan cupped his hands and called out, "Hey, do you need help?" The glow paused, hung there for a moment like it was listening. Then it drifted sideways, slipping deeper into the trees. We both waited, breath held, but no voice answered back. just the hiss of rain, the river swelling somewhere beyond camp. The glow flickered once more, then blinked out, leaving only darkness. Jordan muttered, "That's weird. No one camps without a light." I nodded, staring into the wet black between the trunks. I told myself it was nothing, a trick of rain, a tired mind seeing patterns. But deep down, I already knew it wasn't the last time we'd see that lantern. The rain didn't ease, but neither of us could shake what we'd seen. When the glow returned an hour later, fainter this time, drifting between the same line of trees, Jordan was already pulling on his jacket. He said, "We should check. What if it's somebody lost?" I hesitated. The storm was brutal, our gear already soaked, and everything in me screamed to stay by the fire. But leaving someone to wander out there alone felt worse. So I grabbed my flashlight and followed. We moved carefully, boots sliding in mud, beams cutting through the sheets of rain. The glow always stayed just ahead, close enough to keep us moving, far enough that we never closed the gap. It slipped around tree trunks, hovered just beyond ridge lines, darted out of sight only to reappear a dozen yards farther on. "Hey!" Jordan shouted. "Stop! We can help you!" No answer. Only the steady flicker of light, leading us deeper. After 15 minutes, I realized I didn't recognize the terrain anymore. The trail was gone, drowned under puddles and runoff, every direction looking the same in the storm. My chest tightened. We'd left the map and compasses back at camp. "Jordan," I said, raising my voice over the downpour, "we need to turn back." He didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the glow, jaw set, as if he couldn't hear me at all. The rain streamed down his hood, flashlight beam wobbling in his unsteady grip. I grabbed his arm, yanking hard. He blinked, finally looking at me. "What?" "I'm snapped. Look around. We've already gone too far." The glow wavered, then slid silently between two pines, waiting. For a moment, Jordan was torn, like something was pulling him toward it. Then thunder cracked overhead, and the light vanished in an instant. The forest went dark. Just rain, just trees, no lantern. And that was when I realized the path home felt farther than ever. We tried to retrace our steps, but the storm had erased everything. The ground was a churn of mud and runoff, branches sagged low with water, and every tree looked the same in the beam of our flashlights. "Jordan was back this way," he insisted, pushing through the undergrowth. I wasn't so sure. My gut told me we were drifting farther with every step. The storm pressed down around us, the rain so loud it drowned out our own voices. That's when the glow came back. Not one this time, two. Side by side, deeper in the forest. They bobbed slowly, weaving between the trunks, just out of reach. "See? They're leading us back," Jordan said, though his voice wavered. I shook my head. "No, they're not." The two lights split apart, sliding in opposite directions, circling wide. Then a third appeared behind us, faint but steady, blocking the way we'd just come. My stomach nodded. We turned in slow circles, flashlights darting, rain blurring everything. The lights hovered at the edges of sight, never touching the beams directly, never making a sound. Then they began to move.
Not away this time, but closer. Step by step, they drifted in, narrowing the circle. My hand shook so hard the flashlight beam jittered across the trunks. Jordan raised his rifle, voice breaking. "Stay back!" The lights didn't flinch. They floated closer, slow and deliberate, until I thought they'd drift straight into us. And then thunder cracked so loud it rattled the trees. For a split second, the whole forest lit white. Branches, rain, trunks, everything seared into my eyes. When the thunder faded, the lights were gone. Only the storm remained, pounding harder than ever, leaving us alone in the dark. We stumbled through the storm until our legs burned, not speaking, too afraid that if we stopped, the lights would return. The forest seemed endless, every tree identical, every step taking us deeper into the dark. Somehow, maybe by instinct, maybe by luck, we found the glow of our campfire embers hours later. The sight of our little tarp and tents nearly buckled my knees. We collapsed into camp, soaked, trembling, too exhausted to talk. Neither of us mentioned the lights again that night. When dawn came, the storm finally broke. The forest looked normal again, washed clean, birds flitting through wet branches. No sign of lights, no footprints, no sign that we had ever left camp at all. We packed quickly, cutting the trip short. Neither of us argued. By noon, we were back on the main trail, the storm nothing but a smear of gray clouds behind us. I haven't been back to that forest since, but sometimes when the rain falls just right, I catch myself looking out the window and seeing it again, a faint golden glow between the trees, always just beyond reach, always waiting for me to follow.
Rain on a tent is one of the most peaceful sounds you can imagine. Steady, familiar, something that lulls you into sleep. But what if, buried in that rhythm, you began to hear something different? A sound too deliberate to be rain. A hollow tap, 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 circling your camp in the dark, keeping perfect rhythm until the sun came up. That's what I heard one night, and it's why I'll never trust the rain to keep me safe again. It was supposed to be a simple weekend trip, just me and my friend Lisa hiking a short trail into the state forest, camping for 2 nights, then heading home. The forecast had called for showers, but we figured a little rain wouldn't ruin the trip. By the time we set camp, the drizzle had turned into a downpour. We managed to pitch our tents on a patch of high ground and string a tarp between 2 pines. The fire never caught, not with wood soaked through, so we ate cold sandwiches and laughed about being terrible campers. The storm pressed in heavy that night. Rain rattled on the tarp, poured down the tent walls, filled the forest with white noise. The air was damp and close, every breath tasting like wet leaves. I crawled into my sleeping bag early, listening to the storm. At first, it was soothing. The steady patter on the roof of the tent reminded me of nights as a kid lying in bed while storms rolled overhead. But then, mixed into the rhythm of the rain, I started to hear something else. A sound that didn't belong. Tap, tap, tap. Soft, hollow, and deliberate, like knuckles rapping against wood. At first, I told myself it was just branches dripping, but the longer I listened, the more I realized this wasn't random. It was timed, perfectly spaced, too steady to be the rain. I lay still, holding my breath, trying to convince myself it was nothing, just water pooling on a branch, dripping in a rhythm. But the sound wasn't above me, it was moving. Tap, tap, tap. It circled, slow and deliberate, pacing around our camp in the dark. Each knock landed in the mud-soft silence between raindrops, hollow like wood on wood, steady as a metronome. I whispered, "Lisa, you awake?" Her voice came back groggy. "What? You hear that?" For a moment, she was quiet. Then, "Yeah." Her tone sharpened, instantly alert. The taps kept circling. Once they stopped right against the tent wall near my head, so close I thought the fabric would press inward. Then they started again, moving toward the back, then around to Lisa's side. She hissed, "It's someone out there." I wanted to believe her, because the alternative, that it wasn't, was worse. I unzipped the tent just enough to stick out my flashlight. Rain blurred the beam into a silver haze, lighting nothing but wet trees and mist. The tapping stopped the instant the zipper moved. I swept the light left and right. No figures, no branches moving, just storm and mud. When I zipped the tent shut again, the silence stretched tight. For a moment, I thought maybe it was over. Then it started again. Tap, tap, tap. Slow, hollow, patient, circling us in the dark. The tapping grew bolder as the night dragged on. At first it was soft, like someone testing the sound. Now it landed sharper, hollow knocks echoing against the rain-soaked silence. Tap, tap, tap. It circled us endlessly, never speeding up, never breaking rhythm. Sometimes it stopped right against the tent wall, so close I swore I felt the fabric quiver with the vibration. Then it would drift away again, the sound moving in a slow loop around our camp.
Lisa clutched her flashlight, whispering, "It's walking. It's pacing us." I didn't want to agree, but my skin prickled with the same realization. Rain is chaotic, never even. But this was perfect. Too perfect. Once, the taps paused at the back of my tent. I aimed my flashlight out through the thin nylon just to see a vague shadow move across the beam. Too tall, too narrow. My throat tightened. I fumbled for my pistol. My voice shook as I whispered, "If it comes closer, I'll fire." Lisa grabbed my arm. "Don't! What if it's someone?" Before she could finish, the tapping slammed against her side of the tent. 5 quick raps in a row, hollow and sharp, before falling back into its steady rhythm. She yelped, covering her mouth with her hand. We sat frozen, listening, the storm pressing down all around us. The tapping never stopped, never faltered. It just kept circling, patient and deliberate, as if it had all the time in the world. And no matter how hard the rain fell, it never once blended with the storm. It was separate, clear, and it wanted us to know it was there. We didn't move. We barely even breathed. The tapping went on and on, keeping its hollow rhythm like some kind of ritual. Tap, tap, tap. Sometimes it passed close enough that the nylon walls trembled with the vibration. Sometimes it drifted farther, fading into the storm, only to return minutes later from the opposite side. Always measured, always patient. Lisa whispered once, "What does it want?" Her voice cracked halfway through. I didn't answer. I didn't know. Every instinct screamed to unzip the tent and run, but the storm outside was brutal. and the thought of leaving that thin wall of fabric felt worse. So we stayed, clutching flashlights and weapons we were too afraid to use, listening to the things circle again and again. The hours dragged. My body ached from staying so still, ears straining to follow each beat of that unnatural rhythm. At one point, I thought I heard 2 sets of taps, one circling slow, the other faint, farther away. But when I tried to focus, they blended back into one. Just before dawn, as the storm began to ease, the tapping slowed, the intervals stretched, softer now, almost casual. Then, as the sky began to pale through the canopy, it stopped altogether. No fading footsteps, no retreat, just silence. We waited another hour before unzipping the tents, half expecting something to be waiting. But outside was nothing but wet ground, dripping branches, and the soft hush of the forest after rain. The morning light should have been a relief, but it only made everything feel stranger. The forest looked ordinary again, wet leaves, gray sky, mist clinging to the trees. The storm had left puddles everywhere, mud slick and deep. Perfect ground for holding tracks. We searched the camp slowly, circling outward. If something had paced around us all night, there should have been signs, prints, scuffs, even broken branches. But there was nothing. Just our own boot marks from setting up camp the evening before. Lisa crouched by the tent, running her hand over the mud. "It was right here," she whispered. "I heard it knocking right here." The ground was smooth, untouched, except for rain. We packed quickly after that, neither of us saying much. By noon, we were back on the main trail, walking fast, the weight of the storm still clinging to our shoulders. It's been years since that night, but I still hear it sometimes when rain pounds against the roof. Soft, steady, hollow, tap, tap, tap. It's never random like water. It's too regular, too patient. And when I lie awake listening, I can't help but wonder if it's still out there in the woods, circling another tent, waiting for someone else to hear it.